thank you so much for inviting me to make a few remarks, many of which I'm sure will already have been said, but I had no way of knowing what other people were going to say. So let me just say the Jane Goodall Institute, JGI, is involved in environmental crime in the area of illegal wildlife trafficking, and we have been for some time. Indeed, this trade is of major concern to all of those involved in the conservation of our planet's ecosystems, species extinction, biodiversity loss, and climate change, all of which are interrelated, all of which have been caused by our disrespect of the natural world on which we depend, and our disrespect of animals, who are treated as commodities rather than the sentient beings that they actually are. The illegal wildlife trade is big business, estimated to be worth some 20 billion US dollars every year, and it's growing. It's fueled by corruption at all levels, and it's driving many species of animals, such as elephants and rhinos, and plants, such as rosewood trees, closer and closer to extinction. Just one example. The pangolin, sometimes known as the scaly anteater, is valued in traditional Chinese medicine for the supposed medicinal value of its scales. It's the most trafficked of all mammals. Recently, 2 shipments of pangolin scales, each shipment weighing about 14 tons, were confiscated by customs in Singapore in 1 week. In 2015, Traffic identified 67 countries or territories implicated in smuggling pangolins, with syndicates using 27 new routes in a year to evade detection over 5 years. These groups are becoming ever more resilient and continually adapting to new rules and regulations. As we speak, many nations, as you all know, are committed to fighting this illegal trade. Nation CEOs, companies, businesses, and so on, which is good news. I think it's fair to say that the involvement of the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime and Interpol, in addition to the conservation community, this simply underscores the fact that much of this trade is operated by transnational criminal syndicates that are also involved in money laundering and drug, mineral, arms, and human trafficking. The illegal wildlife trade is a chosen partner for these groups because it's seen as low-risk, high-reward business. Enforcement is often lax. Customs officials are often ill-informed, and bribery is common. The illegal wildlife trade is hugely increasing in value as the criminal syndicates have taken their trade online. So, of course, global awareness and reach of conservation organizations has increased with the advent of new technology. The internet and social media has also increased the reach of wildlife traffickers and expanded the universe of potential sources and buyers of illegal wildlife. There's one urgent reason for closing down this trade, which has already been mentioned. Trafficked animals or their body parts are sold for food, medicine, or pets in wildlife markets around the world, typically in unhygienic and extraordinarily cruel conditions. And this enables pathogens such as viruses to jump from an animal to a human, which may create a new zoonotic disease such as COVID-19 that's caused so much suffering and economic chaos around the world. We're actually paying the price for not heeding the warning of scientists studying these diseases because they've been predicting a pandemic of this sort for years. It's this same disrespect for animals and the environment that's led to the climate crisis. We are part of the natural world and we depend on it for air, water, food, everything. But what we depend on is healthy ecosystems, an ecosystem made up of the biodiversity of plants and animals in a given area. And as the rate of extinction of plants and animals increases, these ecosystems are becoming weaker. And the illegal wildlife trade is seriously implicated in all of this. And let's not, please, forget the impact that trafficking has on animals. It's responsible for the most appalling suffering of millions of individual sentient beings. Each one has a personality. Each one is capable of fear and knows terror and pain. Clearly, this illegal wildlife trade is a hugely complex problem that can only be solved through cross-border collaboration, such as you are all talking about, between all the different organizations. And because of its links with money laundering and the trafficking of drugs, arms, and so on, as well as its threat to human health, the illegal wildlife trade is now recognized as a problem of mutual concern to all countries and an increasing income source for transnational criminal syndicates. Virtually every country plays a part in wildlife trafficking, either at source, in transit, or at the destination. And it's really heartening to see that international commitment to fighting this trade is growing stronger, and more organizations from governments to citizens are playing a part. It's really important that we urge governments and the legal systems to prosecute those at the top. There's often a reliance on prosecuting poachers and illegal fishermen on the ground, but it's those individuals up at the top. Sometimes they're not even known, they're shadowy figures. Sometimes they are known, but they're so wealthy and so powerful that governments dare not prosecute them. So it's really good that you are all gathered to discuss these complex issues, and really good that more and more people are beginning to understand the desperate need to solve them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your strong message, and especially for widening our perspective and pointing to the links of this problem to the global problem, the global crisis we have with the pandemic and with the climate change. I'm so excited to have you with us. So if you allow, and if you still have time, I would ask you maybe two questions. And the one is, how can we ensure that the importance of combating environmental crime is jointly addressed at the international agenda by money laundering experts on the one side and conservation experts on the other side? And the second question, what can we as individuals do to help prevent environmental crimes, as these activities can seem very abstract and outside of the scope of personal influence?
Well, I think I'm better qualified to answer your second question, really, than your first. You know, it's not my thing. My thing is conservation of chimpanzees' habitats, alleviating poverty. All I know is that it's, you know, we can't, when we think of addressing the wildlife, illegal wildlife trafficking, what do we have to do? We have to alleviate poverty. We have to improve the lives of the local communities, because they're very vulnerable to being approached. That's the same for human trafficking. You know, when you're very poor, and when you're very poor, you're going to shoot an animal or capture an animal to get some money in your desperation to be able to feed your family. So alleviating poverty is tremendously important. Education programs, getting education about wildlife trafficking and illegal money laundering and so on into school, well, universities anyway, and some of it into schools, so that people become more aware, and to have more campaigns to get this message out, to have more wildlife films made to show that this issue is absolutely central. It's not something off at the side. And we've all been kind of forced to think about this pandemic that we're in the middle of, and people have tended to forget about wildlife trafficking and even forget about climate change, and certainly forget about loss of biodiversity. That has seemed less important, but it's far more important. It's an existential threat to all our future. So this collaboration between all the different organizations, extending it, as you say, wider into different sectors of society is tremendously important. And introducing a One Health, the One Health is environment, animals, people, perhaps into CITES legislation, as JGI is trying to do. But what we can do as individuals, we can talk about the issue. Many people have social media platforms and discuss the issue on those platforms and help people understand that it's really important. People can donate money to organizations, and this would include supporting rangers on the ground, the rangers who risk and lose their lives to protect these precious animals from poachers, including these cartels who come swooping down in helicopters to shoot rhinos. And the rangers, often poorly equipped, nevertheless are going out there on the front line and doing what they can. So supporting them is something very important that we can do. And those are the main things, I think: general education, right to your government. Oh yes, the demand, controlling the demand. So people should become aware of what they're buying. Does it contain illegal animal or plant species? The collectors, they collect online, butterflies, birds, things like that. And, chimpanzees are endangered through wildlife trafficking of young ones to sell for zoos or pets and so on. And you can buy a chimpanzee online in the United States, and this is shocking. And somehow all of this is interconnected. So I would end up by saying one of the most important things is to go after those people at the top of the international cartels, because if those are targeted, then their networks may tend to crumble. And this will have a hugely beneficial effect for wildlife, for the environment, and for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer and for sharing your wisdom from your long experience with us. I think it really tremendously helps to raise the awareness for this problem and for bringing together the right people, as you say. So it really has been a great honor to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us virtually, and all the best.